is the last session of the day. I promise everyone who stays will get free beer and wine afterwards. It does not open until we finished here, so no sneaking away, Mark Zander, I know. The happy hour will open when we finish here. So, gosh, we've had a lot of conversations and we are back on this stage. I hope you've all had a wonderful afternoon, yes? Yeah, good. Come on, a bit more exciting than that. Come on, this is the last session. We need to raise the roof. Come on. Okay. Okay, we've had a lot of conversations about the different parts of media, about in-housing, out-housing, about being bold, about being brave, about using digital, about using video. But we need to know from the key people that are putting these plans in place what it takes to be a global media director in 2019 and beyond. So, we have got to take us through this. We've got a Festival of Media Global debutant, which is wonderful, so be very kind to her. But we've also got a Festival of Media big supporter, so be kind to him too. And our first speaker from ID Comms, who hasn't been on our stage before as well, so we're very excited. So let's welcome them to the stage. Let's get John Payne up here, lead consultant from ID Comms, Jerry D'Angelo, Global Media Director for P&G, and I saved my famous challenge till the end, Xenia, I'm going to get this completely wrong in Slovak, Olabashova, for Global Media Director for Duracell. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you've had a good afternoon. So what's it like to be a global media director? How does it feel to lead media for a global brand today? This session is all about exploring the role of a global media director, trying to get behind the job title, which I'm really pleased to be leading this session because for many years I've been in a global media role before joining ID Comms. So I know something about what it feels like to be in the role. So we're going to talk to Xenia, we're going to talk to Jerry, and hear more about it. Okay. So, guys, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Hello.
So, Xenia, tell me, how's the conference so far? Any highlights for you? As a global media director, yes. How's it been so far?
So it's my first time actually here in Rome. I was last year in October in Latam and find it very different and in content and in people attending versus the one here. But I find this one very refreshing in what is being spoken. Also a bit worried that we are still speaking about the same things over and over again. And heartwarming, especially the first session in the morning with Jazz, who opened up a very painful discussion on personal taboos and how this actually humanizes all the management functions and roles we are in.
Really good, absolutely true. I think we're all very inspired from this morning. Yeah, yeah. Jerry, how about you? Any highlights?
Yeah, I'd have to concur. I think it was great to start the conference with 3 very strong, powerful female voices, which I think is unusual, and I think it deserves to be called out. I also particularly liked the tea session, and not just because they had lots of P&G examples, but I think it started to showcase one of the big challenges for us as an industry, because if we can't get our creative development right from source in these new digital environments, then I think we're going to have some real problems. And I think that Coco managed to show some really good examples of that.
Fantastic, really good, really interesting. So, global media directors. Perhaps the good place to start is, what is the role? So Jerry, what actually do you do?
That's a great question. I better get this one right, because there's quite a lot of my colleagues here. I think probably the easiest way of describing it, it's a coin with 2 sides, I think. One part is very much about the here and now and delivering accountability, because the dollars that we provide governance and stewardship across are very significant for the organization, and every kind of small percentage of performance really kind of matters. So making sure that we're understanding how the money is being spent and understanding how that money could be spent even better under the banner of accountability, I think, is one very important part of the role. The other part of the role is much more forward-looking and is much more about innovation and making sure that we are the guardians of the business from a media perspective to make sure that we're future-proofing the organization, because the pace of change is so fast and so dynamic externally. So I would probably characterize it in those two things, really,
Right.
accountability and innovation.
Accountability, innovation. So Xenia, what about you? What's the heart of the role from your perspective?
Anyone in the forum actually who is doing skydiving? No one.
Skydiving?
One. Oh, we have a couple of people. Exciting. So for me, it's like a skydiver's instructor's job, actually. And you might think it's very restless, and it's maybe a bit sick if you think about it this way. But a skydiver's instructor's job is about safety. So you want to train the participant or applicant, because they're going to jump from the plane at 4,000 meters. They have to fall down for 45 seconds in a free fall, and then they have to open their own parachute. There is no one to help them to open the parachute. So they have to get properly trained. They have to have the right equipment, tools, calibrate it to their body size, weight, needs that they have. They have to understand the risks, malfunctions that can happen in the air, and how to address them and battle them. So for me, actually, my scope and role for a media leader is also about safety. So making sure that the company's investments are safe. It's about brand safety. It's about people's safety, that what they do and decisions they make are rooted in fundamentals of the business understanding. They get the right tools and processes. And ultimately, as Jerry said, it's about future-proofing. So there is company's future behind the investments we are making in media and communication.
Fantastic. So you are a skydiver instructor?
Not instructor, but I'm a skydiver. So I went through the process of learning to become a skydiver.
That's great. I would love to come on the stage and say, I'm a skydiver. That's brilliant. Really great. So no, that's a fantastic analogy to use, isn't it? Really good. We could do a lot with that in terms of the X on the ground, what's that mark, and the headwinds that you must fall through.
Yes. There's a lot of risk.
Really, really good. And you've come from, you're relatively new into a media leadership role, aren't you? Because you've come from a brand marketing background.
Yes.
So making that shift across, what's been most exciting about coming into the media role?
So interestingly enough, Duracell was part of Procter & Gamble until 2016. We were transitioned out to a standalone company, and now we are owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And when in P&G, I was on brand design side and delivery side across different disciplines. And then in New Duracell Berkshire Hathaway, I was actually appointed leading international media before assuming the global responsibilities. So I think the biggest difference coming from brand to media is independence. I got much more follow-ups and, let's say, detailed views when I was in brand side, because everybody thinks they are a creative director and they can input in the company. While not so many people are interested at the end of the day in media as such. As if everything works, everything is fine. Yes, and it's a very independent role. But on the other side is interdependence that you have with all the other functions, especially in marketing, that you are trying to provide and facilitate for, being in the design, being in the delivery side actually of the marketing function as well. So independence, interdependence. And the other area is the speed of change that the industry is going through, where in brand marketing you don't necessarily experience that speed of change that you have in media. And just picking up all the trends here in the forum, actually, in the festival is amazing. Right. How much you realize you don't know attending forums like these and the areas you have to keep learning on.
So speed of change and independence.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So Jerry, and you know, got to try and coin this question as politely as possible. You, however, have been with media for longer than Xenia.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, given that different perspective, what are the kind of key changes that you've seen most recently in the role?
Yeah, so I started in media, I think, around the time of the Gulf War, but the first Gulf War.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea of how long it is. And I think just to dramatize the change, the very first person I encountered that was in a client-side media director role, I won't name names just to protect the innocent here. The way that this individual justified their role was that they said that they could save enough money by checking the media invoices coming into the advertiser to cover their annual salary. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, because I was on agency side at the time, I thought, well, that sound too difficult, I could maybe aspire to that over a period of time. So if I benchmark the aspiration, albeit quite a modest aspiration for that individual in that organization at that particular time, to where the media director role is now, I mean, they are virtually completely kind of polar opposites. And I think that what's happened is that the role of a media director internally, an advertiser, has become much more pivotal and strategic, in line with how media has become much more pivotal and strategic to the industry as a whole, and particularly large advertisers. So I think there's been a real kind of fundamental evolution, and that rate of change in the evolution has only been getting faster and faster over recent years.
Good, really good. So would it be fair to say that media was back at 19, whatever the first Gulf War, sort of a box at the end of a campaign, you know, the execution, and now much just across the whole thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, I mean, there's various different analogies that you could use to characterize how media was described back then, whether it was a kind of a commodity or a delivery system. Yeah. But you know, if I think of my own personal experiences, whether they were on the agency side or even indeed on the client side, media ended up getting relegated further and further back in the conversation with less and less time. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think what happens is that media now tends to be present in almost every single conversation, whether I'm there or not, which I think is a good thing. And it tends to be a subject that's discussed first and foremost. I mean, still, there are conversations about creativity, I think, and about big ideas, but almost indeed on the same kind of level, I think creativity occupies that kind of spot.
So media being pulled in to all different aspects of communications, marketing, absolutely. And so taking a much more center stage than what was previously a much more backstage. So there you are, center stage. So how does that feel? Is that feeling good? Is it feeling like there's, you know, that's expansive, I can get stuck in, there's loads I can do, that's great? Or does it feel more sort of uncomfortable, more sort of like a vice, being sort of the walls coming in at either side, and it's kind of too much?
Yeah, I've heard that analogy a couple of times now, and the first time I heard that, it felt a bit alien to me. I didn't feel like I was in a role where I was kind of hemmed in, and there was pressure coming from all sides, and there was kind of erosion of kind of my area of responsibility and my remit. I actually think it's the other way. I think what's happening is my own personal experience is that I'm experiencing more and more adjacencies into other parts of the organization, whether it's from a research perspective, or whether it's from a data acquisition and utilization perspective, or whether it's from a technology perspective. So I find now that I'm either being asked to, or without even being asked to, contributing to discussions and debates that even, I don't know, 2 years ago I wouldn't have been part of. So I think it's a very expansive role that has a legitimate reason to express a point of view and an opinion in these areas, these other adjacencies, because I think what the company is really realizing that if you get those things right and you can harness some of the real potential that sit in other parts of the business, you can really funnel that through into media execution and make a big difference to the business.
Super, thank you. So Xenia, I mean, is that how it feels for you? Is there a sort of pressure to know all aspects of media when you're having these different conversations, these adjacencies to the different parts of the organization? Are you sitting there feeling the pressure of knowing all things media, or how does that work in the role?
Yes, and I think it's also driven by the size of the company that I operate in and the management style that we pursue in Duracell. That my direct manager, who's a CMO, does expect a one-stop shop answer. So I do not have the time and possibility to reach out to the functional experts, for example, when it comes to technologies or when it comes to executions itself. So I need to be knowledgeable enough to provide the level of expertise and answer she expects me to give. So it is demanding because indeed it's changing very fast as we keep hearing and we keep experiencing ourselves. So learning is one of the massive deliverables that I need to be on top of and understanding the trends, bringing the trends, working with the right agency partners across the sites that we have, finding the right people to work in a team as well, and being surrounded by the brave people that are willing to make decisions and bringing the new knowledge in. So yes, totally.
So can we explore that a little bit more? So, so you're quite a smaller media team, aren't you?
Yes.
So you're having to really get some strong connections with those people that you're working around. How do you position media? How have you found those relationships have worked most effectively for you in the other actors in the stage?
So I think there's a horizontal vertical axis. We are very involved with my media team, which is a person of one sitting here actually in the forum today. And I have an online marketing leader as well. And we interact a lot with the other functional areas of marketing, but other disciplines as well, being in finance, research as well, commercial teams, or local marketeers on the ground. We are less interacting top or horizontally upwards. I believe there's a lot of trust into the team, what we are doing and delivering. And hence, as long as there's no issue, there is no questions, let's say. Yes, everything is working perfectly. But with the functions along that we have to work with, it's an everyday interaction and dialogue, because we have the luxury of a small team that are working on a global basis for servicing just one brand, Duracell. So we do actually benefit of everyday dialogues and interactions, and we don't work in silos anymore. Like my experience 10 years ago, that you would have brand design working on delivering toolkit, communication toolkit, that then gets handed over to media to buy the media, or the local marketing people to execute the toolkit. But now it's all interconnected and you have to interact with all the stakeholders in the same time.
Yeah, so very, very woven in.
Yes.
That's been quite a straightforward
yes, I think
process.
What helps a lot is keep them educated and informed.
Okay.
Yes, because they also have to understand the pace of change and why we are doing and requesting the things we are requesting.
I see. Yeah, good. So, so Jerry, you mentioned earlier accountability. Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking then if we could explore that a little bit more. So, being center stage, much more accountable across many different aspects of the whole setup within marketing. I wonder how that accountability looks for two people on the board. So the CFO and then the CMO. Can you think about how they would think about the role of a global media director, and how you would think a global media director ought to be building relationships with a CMO and a CFO?
So I think it's no surprise to anyone in the audience that, as an organization, and certainly the chief brand officer in Mark Pritchard, who leads the marketing organization at P&G, there's clearly a huge recognition of the importance of media. There's a huge passion to really kind of get involved into the detail of it. So I think, for me, I think I have it relatively easy because I'm kind of going with that flow. I mean, there is a flip side to that when you have a CMO that's very interested in the subject matter that you're supposedly an expert in. So I think that I don't need to work at that. There's already a very clear understanding that media is an important part of driving the business. There's a very clear understanding that media is a significant contributor to some of the savings commitments that we've made. There's a very clear understanding that we can't stand still and continue to do the same kind of things. But in terms of how I would advise other people in a role where they don't have it quite as clear cut as that, is that the way that businesses run are pretty straightforward, right? Share prices are driven off the back of revenue gains or margin gains, and I think that media lends itself very neatly to that, right? So you can demonstrate some efficiencies, and I think that's been very much the case in the industry for the last 10, 12, 15 years, where we're driving efficiencies in the media supply chain and seeing media as a cost to be reduced and controlled. I think that was very much the case. So driving efficiencies that could be dropped to the bottom line of the business in many cases, or indeed to be reinvested. But I think increasingly, media is now starting to be seen as a way that it's not a cost of the business, but it's an investment in growth. And the more that you can orientate what you do on a day-to-day basis and how you are directing your internal and external resources in order to drive additional revenue, I think that starts to become two very powerful points of connection into the business. You can't really do one or either, you can do both, that's ideal. And I think that a lot of the most recent capabilities lend themselves much more to the effectiveness part rather than the efficiency part, which I think is a great thing, because you can't end up cutting your way to growth. You have to kind of grow the top line. So things like, targeting people based on behavior rather than age or gender in order to elicit greater responses from them, I think ultimately is the way to prove your value to those C-level, C-suite level executives and indeed others in the organization.
Yeah, really good. And that duality of efficiency and effectiveness, I mean, it's often over-talked, but actually it's so...
Try and do both.
So
yeah.
central. Great, okay. Conscious that we're going to take a sort of switch. So I think, given that sort of exploration of the role, I wonder, for those coming into the role or have been in the role for some time, your reflections on, if the answer to this may not be so straight, it may be more nuanced, I suspect it will be, but is there a certain type of person that succeeds as a global media director? Are there any particular characteristics that you recognise, Jerry?
Well, let me reprise something I think I might have said to someone earlier today, if it might have been us talking at the coffee break perhaps. The job is not easy, and you can see that in a good percentage of the appointments that get made, particularly people moving from agency side into large corporate organizations. It's not always easy to get it right, and you can see people who come in and then sometimes don't last perhaps as long as they would like. So there is clear evidence, if you were to go back and look at it, the number of people that have gone into these large organizations, not everybody has been able to make a success of it. So I think that that probably does suggest that you need to be a certain type of person, I think. I think that you need bags of adaptability absolutely in spades, because I think that you need to be able to adapt to corporate organizations, and I think you need to be able to adapt in the functional aspects of the role, because the pace of change in the external environment is scarily fast and getting faster and faster with each passing day. So I think that you have to have someone that is prepared to adapt and change according to the circumstances of the role. And I think the other thing you probably need going into a role like this is that you need to have quite a significant intellectual curiosity in order to be able to continue to kind of open up the cerebral pores and allow stuff to kind of continue to come in. And you can't just establish a particular expertise and keep that in place for 5 or 10 years, because I just don't think that works. And so, I mean, I've made a real effort, I think, to continually push myself to be open to new inputs and impetuses in order to keep learning. So I think it's a tricky role.
Good. Outside-in perspective.
Absolutely.
Even when you're inside the organisation. So, and Xenia, how about you? What's your reflections on that? What is there one thing? Is there a particular focus to succeed in the role?
I agree actually with what Jerry said, and Warren Buffett likes to call it, it's a person who is intelligent, who is accountable, and who has high integrity.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's true for any job, in management especially. For a media leader as such, curiosity and the constant hunger for learning is a must. Because it's not about the managing of the people, it's more understanding the whole ecosystem and understanding the impact of it on the company's investments, on the brand itself that we are building.
Good. Yes, thank you. And then if we think about many of the people here will be, or some will be in a global media director role, but there's plenty others that are coming from different places across the ecosystem. So I wonder whether you have any reflections on how do these folks, maybe from a tech company, from a publisher, from an agency, any pearls of wisdom around, given some insight hopefully from this around the life of a global media director. Are there any particular tips on how to succeed in working with global media directors within an advertiser?
Yeah, well, I can only speak from my own personal experience in the company I work with, but I would say that there's a real burning desire to win and succeed, and I think one part of that is being able or being open to kind of external sources of inspiration. So I think we're always going to be very open to people talking to us, I think. And we will, just from my own personal experience with myself and people that we work with, we will respond to telephone calls and emails and such like. The one hint I would give to people is that when we try and let people down gently, then please take the hint, which isn't always the case. There's one or two of you, none of you are here, thankfully, but there's one person in particular that I have in mind. But I would say you've got to demonstrate usefulness and relevance and the ability to kind of really move the needle on things that are important to people in those roles and the companies that they work for. Kind of spurious kind of inbound isn't really going to cut it, I don't think.
Good. Well, thank you both. It's been incredibly insightful to hear about the role of a global media director and hopefully get a little bit behind the job title itself. So thank you so much for
my pleasure
for this. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Fantastic. Would you like to do some questions? Or?
We weren't planning on doing questions.
Oh, okay, fine.
Because we're mindful that the bar is ending shortly.
I'm happy to take Q&A if it doesn't keep anyone from
I think it was so insightful, and people have stayed. They really enjoyed it. Not one person has moved off their seat yet, and don't worry, I've told the bar doesn't open until you leave. Would anyone like to ask a question? Yes, Rob, look at that. Hold on, Rob. Now I left my mic over there. Hold on, Rob, I'll come to you. You can use this one. Hold on. You are. How cool is that? And now I've lost the mic.
I get to speak into a shirt.
Into my face. There you go. Even better.
This is intimate. Guys, what have you found to be the most fulfilling thing that you've done in media, in your organization, in the last 12 months? What's giving you joy?
What's that joy? If you have an answer, go
ahead. Let me go with this. The most fulfilling thing for me, and it's particularly pertinent because we are using the Festival of Media Global Conference to also run our global media meeting concurrently with that. And I think I was going to try and save this for you guys tomorrow morning, but I'll say it now. But I think what the most fulfilling thing that I've experienced over the last 12 months is the organic creation of a community or a team built around a kind of common passion, right? So there are lots and lots of people in the organization that I work with currently, and I'm sure this is the case in many other organizations, who have gravitated to the area of media because it's dynamic, it's interesting, it's challenging, and people are moving towards it. So I feel incredibly gratified and thankful on the back of that, and I'm trying to utilize that as much as I possibly can.
Hi, question for Jerry. You have a plethora of brands, you have large teams, you have a constantly changing media landscape. So what keeps you up at night at the moment?
Are you from PhD? Because I had that question in a... So I had to answer that question about 3 hours ago on video, so I'm going to try and give you the same answer. If I'm really honest with you, the thing that keeps me awake at night is that particularly, for all companies that are marketing-led, but particularly a company that's been around since 1837 and has really built its business on brand building and has really, really understood and got the knack of how to do that. When the external environment is changing so dynamically, there's a huge risk, I think, that many of the learned behaviors that we have perfected so successfully in order to build brands and drive our businesses suddenly don't become relevant anymore. And the thing that really worries me the most is that whilst media consumption is actually increasing, a lot of that media consumption is in places where advertising isn't necessarily, or those environments are not necessarily conducive to advertising for lots of different reasons, whether it's viewability or ad blocking or fraud. And so I think the real unlock for us, and indeed many other large organizations, is how you can begin to deliver those same results, deliver that same level of brand building, but find new ways of doing that. And we're experimenting with many different ways at the moment. And that's the thing that kind of certainly concerns me. But at the same time, I'm seeing enough kind of inspirational success that I think that we can certainly do that.
Very good. Okay. We're gonna stop because we're up against the time. But one of the things I wanted to just finish on was, we talk about the global media director role, and one of the things that we've seen at ID Comms that really we see what you talk about effective global media director is those global media directors who set a really clear ambition for media, and I think that's what you've been hinting at in terms of the capabilities, the direction you want to take the team in to coalesce around. And it sounds so simple, but that North Star for us has been something we've seen that really drives an effective global media director. So just a final thought. But thank you again. Zenia, thank you so much. And Jerry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Superb. Thank you very much. Wonderful finish to the day. Thank you. Wonderful finish to the day. Wonderful. Thank you.